Welcome to the first episode of the VIA OnDemand webinar series. My name is Rob Montgomery and I'm a Partner Success Principal at VIA. I joined about 3 months ago from my previous organisation, which was Infrastructure Partnerships Australia, where I was Head of Economics and Policy. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping matters. So this webinar is going to last about 20 to 30 minutes and I will be moderating the session. So I encourage questions and you can ask questions through the chat box at the bottom of your screen. But our host for today is going to be Ben Hague, my colleague, a Partnerships Principal at VIA. Aside from Ben's experience with VIA, he also has a wealth of experience from his time at Transport for New South Wales, but I'll leave Ben to describe that experience a little bit more.
Thanks, Rob. It's wonderful to be with everyone today, and firstly, thank you for taking the time to participate in this webinar. We hope you find it very valuable. As Rob was saying, my previous role was with Transport for New South Wales, where I was part of the On-Demand Transport program team. Some of you may have come across this program. It's quite well known, and many jurisdictions around the world have taken some time to learn about it. It basically was a program set out to understand what role on-demand transport could play in future transport networks, particularly from a public transport context, but the learnings permeate beyond that particular aspect. And I had the privilege of being able to be associated with the procurement and the implementation and the management of 22 different on-demand trials across different parts of New South Wales. This was both in a metro context, close to the city, broadening out to some of the suburban areas, and then also in rural and regional New South Wales. So it was a broad set of pilots looking at different operators, different softwares being developed, different use cases. And what I'm looking forward to today is taking that experience plus the experience I've had while working with VIA, so over 30 different services I've had direct involvement with, and sharing those lessons back to you through this webinar.
Okay, so the agenda for today. Ben is going to try and cover a fair amount. As he said, he's got a wealth of experience, over 30 deployments that he's been involved with. So he's going to start out by setting the scene and explaining some of the context around the transport challenges that have led to really the development of on-demand industry. We're then going to move on to looking at how to set up transport goals, particularly around on-demand services, and a discussion about on-demand service design and what makes it, what are the use cases, what makes it a good service. We'll also touch on the importance of technology partners and what to look for in technology partners before wrapping up and giving you a sneak peek at what will be in the second episode of the webinar. But I'll hand over to Ben now to get started.
Fantastic. Let's get into it. So, look, really what I want to start with is talking about some of the transport challenges that I've come to know and expect in any type of transport situation I come across. And I've broadly put these into 4 areas, not the only 4 challenges, but they cover a fair amount of them. So it's good to start with challenges, because when there's a challenge, it means we see a better way of doing things, and we know there can be a solution to make our lives better. So one of the first challenges that I oftentimes see in transport networks is the challenge of geographic coverage. Now, we're really good at actually moving thousands of people on trains, and we're really good at moving hundreds of people on high-frequency bus networks. But where we struggle a little bit more is outside of those parameters, when we're trying to move what I call handfuls of people at a time, whether it's trying to move people from their homes to a train station or moving and maybe in a less dense area. And so what happens is we try and use the same tools for moving lots and lots of people to try and moving more handfuls of people, and it's just not as effective. And so on-demand transport can help with that type of situation. The other challenge that I see is that there's a high expectation from our customers for personalization, for a service to be, I guess, a little bit more about them rather than them having to conform completely to the service. So we now expect to be able to track our pizzas, track our parcels. There's the expectation that we can track our vehicles these days. So it's that personalization side. Another one that I'm very familiar with is the problem, I guess, of budget and the economics of transport. There's a continuing expectation that we need to do more with less these days. And that's not just in the public transport context, that's also from a corporate perspective. So when I'm having conversations, whether it be with residential land developers, with airports, with shopping centres, they're always looking for ways that transport might enable them to get a better return on investment. And transport plays a really important role in those type of areas as well. And then the final challenge that I think will only continue to grow is a challenge around the environmental side of things. We live in a day and age where we need to understand the environmental impacts that transport has. And one of the clear ways that we'll be able to have less of an environmental impact is by a movement away from single car occupancy use to more ride sharing. And I don't mean ride sharing in the sense of I'm now sharing with a driver. That doesn't actually help us reduce congestion. That doesn't help us reduce traffic jams and emissions. What we need more people to share a vehicle in the way that they travel. So those are some of the challenges that we have. Now, what a good question is therefore, where does OnDemand sit in this ecosystem? So what I've got here is a little diagram that shows on one end of the spectrum, I guess, a very personalized service that's all about one individual person. That's oftentimes achieved through having private car ownership, or it could be by getting a taxi. Now, that's fantastic because that's all about that one person. It's going to come exactly to where I want to be. It'll take me to my destination, and it will go on the most direct route. And the cost associated with that is the commensurate with that actual high level of personalization. Now, all the way down the other end of the spectrum is a route bus, which is all about you as a passenger conforming to that service. That service is designed to be efficient. It's not really designed to be personalized. So I must adhere to the timetable. That timetable doesn't adjust for me in any way. And also I need to go to a particular bus stop, which might be some distance for me to work. But we have this big space in between that allows OnDemand to play in a space between something that's a little bit more personalized, but is also efficient. And you can see here, I've given a couple of examples where an on-demand service might be, a little bit more personalized in terms of short walking distance. It has very low waiting times, low detour times, whereas there's another position where an on-demand service might actually be a little bit more efficient, where we focus on maybe some longer average wait times to increase the aggregation or the utilization of the service. So that's where OnDemand sits. It sits between these two bookends, and there's plenty of space. And what you'll find is that most transport solutions don't actually sit in those spaces. They sit to either one end or the other. So we want to talk about how we can change the way we view this.
And Ben, there's a question that's come through on this slide. So the question is, I've read some articles saying OnDemand is extremely expensive. How can it be cost effective?
Yeah, it's a really fair question, and my experience, I've definitely dealt with this a number of times. I think the best way to understand that is that when we're trying to solve transport problems, they can be quite different. When you're trying to move thousands of people, a train or a high-frequency bus network might be the correct answer. And you'll probably get some pretty good, average cost per passengers because you're moving a lot of people. But you can't have an entire transport network that only does that part. There's lots of transport challenges that is about moving handfuls of people at a time. It's about trying to deal with a situation in the middle of the day when the amount of demand just isn't going to be the same as at the start of the day. And so it's about using the right tool for the right problem, the right challenge. And like I said earlier, one of the things is we've been trying to use that same tool to answer all of our transport challenges. All right, so now we've kind of established these challenges. Let's talk about how we can solve them. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is, I guess, a sequence of actions that you can take to ensure that an on-demand service has the best chance of being successful from day one. So, like I said earlier, I've dealt with 22 different pilots. I've dealt with other on-demand services. And I oftentimes get asked, say, what are some of the things you learned from that, Ben? And one of the things I learned is that those services or those pilots that maybe didn't reach their full potential or struggled, it had a lot to do with the fact that they weren't established correctly from the very beginning. They weren't designed appropriately, the background work wasn't done, there wasn't enough research into understanding the area that they were going to be in. So what I want to share with you is 5 steps that you can take that will help you to have the best chance of success when you go and deploy the service. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the importance of identifying objectives. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, we need to understand who our customer is, and we need to understand that problem. So are we talking about a commuter problem? Are we talking about that there's no transport at the moment? Are we talking about that there's special needs people with accessibility issue or maybe vision impairment? Or are we talking about that there's a congestion issue? Is there an environmental concern? So understanding these goals and these objectives, understanding who our customers are, who are our target cohorts? Is there a primary one that we're going for as well? Is that a commuter? And then there are some secondary and tertiary ones that we also need to accommodate when we build this up. So by establishing these goals and objectives, it really helps us refine our thinking and the way that we create this particular service.
And make sure, I guess, that you're using the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where we need to start, and that's where some research needs to come in. So then once we've established that, that's really going to lead us to understand who our use case is. So I'm just going to share with you briefly some use cases that might fall out of that beginning process. And I've mentioned some of these before, but let's quickly go through them. So a common use case is first mile, last mile. So this is all about moving somebody generally from their home to another transport hub, whether it be a train station or a bus stop, and then obviously vice versa at the end of the day as well. What's great about this is if we give this meaningful option, it means that somebody, one, doesn't have to use their car at all. And in some situations, which I've definitely seen, which is fantastic, they're actually able to get rid of their second or third household car. It's fantastic. I was writing a service recently when it was firstly deployed, and the first customer that got on actually said, oh, this will be fantastic, because if this service works and I can use this every day, I can actually sell my car. Those are the type of results that we're looking for, which ticks so many boxes. But I guess there's other use cases as well. So geographic coverage or a transit desert. So this might actually be a case where there's a new residential development being built. In my experience, public transport takes a long time to move to a new residential area. But you could have a land developer who says, I'm going to put on some transport options right from the very beginning, so that when people move into my development, they don't necessarily need to buy a second or a third car, because that person who maybe is going to work 2 or 3 times a week, or maybe going every day, but the train station is 3 or 4 kilometers away, now I don't need to have a car. And that's great from the development point of view, because it makes a point of difference for them. But it also might be in another area where, from a transit operator's point of view, they realize that the current route system is not quite of quality enough, and they realize that they can actually provide better coverage and more economic coverage by providing an on-demand service instead of the typical route method of trying to fix transport challenges. Another area that we see quite commonly is, it's named different things. You've got community transport in Australia, total mobility in New Zealand, and sometimes paratransit in other areas of the world. This whole idea is about equitable transport. It's making sure that everyone has access to transport that makes sense for them. Whether you have an accessibility issue, a vision impairment, or there's another reason that traditional transport needs don't quite fit the bill for you, we're able to meet those needs. Now, right now, that's oftentimes met by somebody basically getting a taxi voucher or one vehicle being deployed directly to that person. So there's a really high level of personalization. But the flip side is the economics are really quite difficult, be quite expensive for governments. So by using on-demand technologies, a couple of things happen. We're able to meet those needs more personally, but in a more efficient manner by allowing aggregation. And the tools that we place in the hands of the customer actually means they get a better user experience as well. Another couple of use cases is corporates or universities. Oftentimes this is if there's a large campus and we're looking at trying to move people around the campus. It's not enough to provide transport to the campus if then they can't move around. They still might desire to bring their car to allow that movement. So by providing some type of corporate shuttle, some method to move around, it solves that challenge, and now they can leave their car at home. And then the final one, and often it is the final one when people finally look at it, is our school bus networks. I've had a fair amount of experience in this area, and I find that there's sometimes the last particular area of transport to get looked at. But as a father of 4 kids myself, I know it's important that we provide meaningful solutions to moving children around. And one of the reasons is that if parents aren't confident in those transport solutions, then oftentimes they'll just drive their kids to school, and that creates congestion and other issues. And in addition, once mum or dad get in the car to drop their kids off at school, they're probably going to continue to use that car to go to work or do other things. So it's not a great, I guess, a method of moving children. So using technologies means we can be better at tracking vehicles, understanding when kids are getting on and off the bus for duty of care purposes, and we can put tools in the hands of the parent, the child, and the school so they can understand when those movements are happening. It also helps transport operators to be more effective in the way they design their routes.
And then I guess so on that, let's move on to design of the service and what lessons you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's just quickly recap. We understand our goals and objectives. We understand the customer. We've now got our use case or cases, and now we can design the service. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, we need to start thinking about things such as the size and the shape of the zone. It's not just how big the zone is, it's actually the shape. A circular zone is generally going to be a little bit more challenging than, say, an elongated oval. But there's other things that are important, such as the population density, or what type of traffic are we dealing with. All of these things into play, and they're really important pieces of information that allows us to design the service appropriately. And then that will help us understand maybe how many vehicles will we need for the service, and also maybe the type of vehicles. We also start to think a little bit what's the appropriate fare and how we can promote these things. So all that information comes together, and it helps us to design the service. And when we start to think about this, we then start to understand that when we design the service, let's go back to this continuum that we were talking about, is that our service doesn't actually have to stay at one place on this continuum. It can actually move and flex up and down throughout the day, throughout the week. So a couple of examples. You might establish a service that's all about moving the commuter to a train station in the morning. That commuter is going to be very time sensitive. They're going to want to get to work at a particular time for a meeting. But once we hit, say, 9 o'clock in the morning, most of those commuters have made their way to work. And the customer cohort now using the service is quite different. So we might adjust the way our service works to reflect that new type of customer. And then we get towards the end of our day and we adjust it again for the commuters that are coming home. So we can do that throughout the day. But beyond that, we could also make other adjustments. We might establish a service in a particular way for the weekend, when again, people might be a little bit more time sensitive, less time sensitive, but also may also be trying to travel in groups with their family. So it changes the way the service works. We might have a different service offering when it's the weekend or when it's a public holiday. Christmas period with holidays might be different again. All these things come into play. One of the things that we start to understand is that there's things that we can change, but what I want to demonstrate here is that while we can change lots of different things, they're interconnected with each other. So when I talk about changing the quality of service, which oftentimes we refer to as, say, the average wait time between when you book a service and when you're picked up, the detour time, which is how long you're on that vehicle, and then the walking distance, which is how far am I walking at the start of the trip and at the end of the trip after getting on board and alighting from the vehicle. Now, I can change those things, but it impacts how many vehicles I would need to actually facilitate the service. And it also impacts how many people I can respond to when they're requesting rides. So these three things are interrelated with each other. If I want to increase my quality of service, I absolutely can. But I'm going to have to do one of two things. I'm either going to have to increase the supply of vehicles that I'm using, or potentially the amount of demand that I can meet might actually be slightly adjusted as well. And so it's important that we understand these interrelationships. So going back to lessons that I've learned, I've seen service that are trying to, I guess, bite off more than they can chew. They want a really high quality of service. They want, and that means lots and lots of people want to use it, but then the supply of vehicles has not been enough to actually match those two other fixed parameters. So we can change any one of them, but if you change one, it's going to impact the other two.
Right.
So that then leads us on to, we've established the service design. Now what we want to do is take all this information and we want to simulate it. We want to see what it looks like in the real world. So everything that we've gathered to this point in time is kind of assumptions, it's information, it's good research, but we actually want to see how it all plays together in the real world. Now, we could just go out and deploy it in the real world and see what happens, but if we've got something a little bit wrong, it can be not a great point to try and fix it. We can, but there's a better way, and that's to simulate the service.
And
so,
I imagine that helps with the business case as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And to be able to demonstrate to somebody that we've done all this work and this is what the service will look like when it's running. So when you put it through a simulation, you get a high fidelity output that says, oh, so here's our vehicles. We can see them leaving the depot. We can see all these created customers who are demanding to travel to these different points. We can see the vehicles aggregating demand, dropping them off. And then we get some outputs. We get to see some average wait times. We get to see the actual average utilization. We get to see average walking distances. And so we go from, I guess, a conceptual stage to what we believe it will look like on the ground. And if we need to, we start to adjust it and think, oh, okay, we're not quite getting the quality of service we wanted to. What do we need to adjust? Or it might be that, well, at that demand level, maybe we need to increase the supply, or maybe we need to adjust the service parameters maybe in the middle of the day. So it's a really good way. And then at the end, what that allows you to do is to have a lot of confidence to go out and deploy the service, knowing what it will look like in the real world. So that will give us, I guess, to our final recommendations when we want to go out there, as kind of Rob said, have a business case, say, let's go and do this. And then there's another set of actions which we do, which we'll cover in the next webinar, and Rob will touch on this, but it's things talk about the fears. How do we deploy effectively? How do we, I guess, launch a service, promote it, and then market it as well? So those are the 5 steps that we've gone through. And it's really important that you go through each one of those. They're a little bit iterative. You know, sometimes you can say, oh, that step comes before that step, and there's probably a good argument for that at some points, but hopefully you get the flow. There's a number of things you needed to prepare to get it right from the start, to give you the best chance of having a fantastic service. Now, at this point in time, oftentimes I get asked, well, Ben, that's great, but it's clear that technology is going to play a part in having an effective on-demand service. And how do I choose a good technology partner? is a question I've been asked quite a few times, and what I've done is I guess I've distilled all the learnings and the experience that I've had, and I just want to share 4 main points of what I think makes for a really good technology partner. So the first one needs to be, the technology needs to be intuitive. It needs to be very easy to use. And that's important for the customer, okay? We want something that they're going to pick up, they're going to use, it's going to make sense. There doesn't necessarily need to be a whole lot of a training or explanation of how to use it, and it's very clear in the communication to them. But in addition to the customer, it's about the driver. We need good driver interfaces that makes it really easy for them to do their job. The most important job is to drive a vehicle safely. And so the information that we want to present to them can't detract from that. In fact, it should be making it even easier for them to do that. In addition, we want, from an operational point of view and a reporting point of view, we want this to be nice and easy. We don't want additional administrative burdens to be placed on people who are already busy. So those are things intuitive. The next point I would make is you want a very, very strong algorithm that's able to aggregate demand. Everything I've talked about in terms of the benefits, it's based on the ability of getting more than one person to a vehicle at a time. Like I said earlier, we're talking about ride sharing in its true sense. We're not talking about sharing a vehicle with a driver. We're talking about sharing with other passengers. And the ability to take lots of people's requests for travel, to understand how to aggregate that together effectively without making the service so detrimental to one person that they don't want to use it anymore, that's actually really important. So look for a technology vendor who has a strong aggregator and who has proven experience in actually performing in that respect. And in addition, I think what else is really important is that they've got experience in this field in terms of being, I guess, dealing with customers and dealing with transport operators. They understand what it's like to deal with drivers. All of that experience in the on-demand context is really, really valuable, and it means you have a better chance of ensuring that service on day one is going to be fantastic.
And even some of those examples you cited, they're counterintuitive if you don't have the experience of the shape and zone size.
Correct, yeah. So again, I've seen people, I guess, who have the theoretical knowledge, but have lacked some of that more contextual information. And so then when they've been trying to talk to somebody how this will work, there's an information gap, and that can be a struggle to get past. And then I think the final point that I oftentimes make is you want a technology partner who has the ability to flex and adapt and respond to it. You don't want your service to be, I guess, constrained by the technology. You want your service to be enabled by the technology. And sometimes it might mean that that technology needs some further development. You might want to have a particular request or a particular use case that needs something special. So you want a technology partner that will work with you to be able to get you to that end game. So there's some things to think about when looking at a technology partner.
And Ben, questions come through on this slide. So it's really about sort of early adoption of the technology. The question is, on-demand bus technology is fairly new. What's the pace of technology change like, and how would it be better to wait until it is more established?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a fair question, and I can understand where this person's coming from. I guess what I'd say is that all technology continues to evolve. You know, right now I've got an iPhone 8. My son really wants me to get the iPhone, I think 11 we're up to, because he wants my iPhone 8, and I told him I'm fine with it. But there's going to be an iPhone 11, a 12, a 13. So should I just wait until the iPhone 20, which is going to be better than the iPhone? Well, no, because right now, what the technology is right now is able to solve problems better than just waiting and doing nothing. So will on-demand technology continue to evolve and get better? Absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm excited about this area. But right now, we have the ability to solve transport challenges better than ever before. So, you know, make use of the technology now, and yes, it will continue to get better, but, you know, there's fantastic opportunities right now.
Yeah, I would imagine the learning opportunity is huge as well if you engage with the technology and the type of service.
Absolutely. And my experience is once we engage and have those conversations, there's actually oftentimes more use cases that somebody, whether it's an airport or a transit operator or a government agency, but we could actually do this as well. It's really exciting. So look, just very quickly, we're getting close to the end. I just wanted to share a little bit about VIA. Some of you may be familiar with us. We are a transport technology company. We specialize in ride sharing in the true sense of aggregating demand, getting lots of people into our vehicles. We have close to 100 deployments across the world. And why is that important? Why do I want to share that? Is it's great because each one of these services is at least a little bit different than the other one. There's no identical service across the world. Each time we go out, we meet with our partners, we understand their needs, and we try and understand how we can use our technologies for them to reach their goals. Sometimes that's a goal to help customers have a better experience. Sometimes it's about operational efficiency. Sometimes it's about solving a problem that hasn't really been solved before. Sometimes it's helping a corporate to understand how they can get a better return of investment in some of their infrastructure or other areas. But each one of these is different. And when we sit down and I talk and have these conversations, I'm able to point to these different services that we have and give them a real world experience about what's going on. I think the other thing that I'm excited about VIA is just the sheer scale of our development team. We oftentimes say we've got 350 people who are sitting around there, and all they do is think, how can they make transport technologies better? How can we take these ideas and solve more of these challenges in smarter and better ways? And what are the problems and challenges that our partners bring to us that we can get better? And it continues to happen on a day-by-day basis. So, I'm loving this world that we're in right now. We have these challenges that have been around for a long time, and now we've got these new tools and abilities to solve them in ways that we haven't done before, and to really make a difference to these challenges.
We're going to obviously thank Ben for his great introduction to the world of on-demand transport. But as you mentioned throughout your presentation or the discussion today, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of deployments. And so for episode 2 of the webinar series, we're going to dig into some of those examples. We're going to look at how to effectively launch a new service, fare structures and price points, how to raise awareness for a new service, and obviously some of the marketing challenges, customer experience challenges at the launch point. We're also going to have a look at how you select the right vehicles and drivers, and get into some of the details, which I'm sure you're all interested to know. So thanks again for joining us in this first episode, and please let us know if you have any feedback or further questions. Be sure to share this series with any colleagues who you think might be interested and find it valuable. Thanks from Ben and I, and we'll be seeing you shortly.
Thanks, everyone.